Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Just incredible. I mean, what are the odds that the virus would come from Wuhan, where the Wuhan Institute for Virology is located, and there is no connection at all? I mean, surely common sense or, the process of deduction, one would start with thinking, well, is there any correlation, especially since China, as you could see in that video, was bragging about their virus research? Well, that topic has been considered a conspiracy theory for more than a year, when suddenly all the authorities from Anthony Fauci to Facebook have said, well, hang on, maybe we won't deplatform you as a conspiracy theorist for talking about it after all. Joining us now to talk about this and how this is playing out in Canada's House of Commons is our friend Spencer Fernando, proprietor of SpencerFernando.com and one of the few independent journalists left in Canada. Spencer, great to see you. Sorry for that long introduction. I mean, it might not be related to the Institute of Virology, but that sure seems like an obvious place to start. If you were inspector, if you were a sleuth, if you were a police detective, Sherlock Holmes, you'd probably start at the Institute of Virology. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, one thing I've been that's been in the back of my head through a lot of this is it reminds me a bit of Chernobyl, right? You have a communist state that unleashes something that could be very devastating to the world, or possibly unleashes something. And, in Chernobyl, the Soviet Union, they weren't planning to tell anybody about it, right? It was only when it became such an obvious problem. And other countries were like, hey, what's all this radiation going on over there? They had to admit what's going on, right? So it's kind of like the default position for, ruthless communist states is to just never admit any mistakes and just, cover it up. And you look at China's behavior, it was hilariously defensive after the virus emerged, right? I mean, first they said, oh, it's not a threat at all. And then they just denounced anyone who even brought it up. Oh, there's no possibility it's from the lab. Then they didn't let people in, and then they destroyed a lot of evidence. And so you think, okay, I mean, does this look like a country that's open and transparent and wants people to actually, clear it? Do they think they'll be cleared if there's a real investigation? So again, the idea that for a year people were, banned and, as you say, deplatformed for bringing this up, and then all of a sudden, oh, maybe we should actually look into it. I mean, that might have been nice a year ago when there might have still been some evidence around.
Yeah. I think it's like so many of the things, if Donald Trump said it, then to prove you were a good liberal, or at least not a crazy Trumpist, you had to oppose it. I mean, Trump would talk about possible remedies, possible medicines, possible treatments, and immediately, because Trump said it, you weren't allowed to re-say it. And I think that's what happened with this. Now, here's the thing. Here's the Canadian angle, and I find this deeply troubling. Canada has a very high security virus research lab called the National Microbiology Laboratory. It's a level 4 virus secure, like it's where you study Ebola. Like there's not a lot of places like that. It's in Winnipeg, and incredibly, Chinese nationals, but not just Chinese nationals, people with the People's Liberation Army, like Chinese military researchers, were allowed to work there to study these viruses in Canada. With Canada's knowledge, permission, cooperation, they actually published papers with the PLA. And this is not a rumor or a conspiracy theory. We know this. The Globe and Mail actually had a wonderful expose on it. The RCMP and CSIS raided this facility, led to the ouster of some of these Chinese nationals. And yet anyone who talks about it is called a racist or a conspiracy theorist. Spencer, can I show you a quick clip from the House of Commons where Candace Bergen asked about this lab? I want to play it for our viewers, and I'd love your thoughts on it afterwards. So stay right there. Hang on. Here's Candace Bergen.
The Honourable Member for Portage-Lisker.
Well, the problem is, and the Prime Minister maybe does not realize this, is communist China cannot be trusted. I know he admires their basic dictatorship. I know he liked to do fundraisers with them over the years. I know he thought they were the first go-to for vaccines. But at this point, we would hope that he would learn a lesson and put the safety, security, and protection of Canadians above this fascination he has with the communist regime. So again, will he commit to ending this research and this cooperation with a regime that not only doesn't have our interest in mind, but actually wants to hurt Canada.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes, from the beginning of my career onwards, I have worked with many Chinese Canadians and indeed had fundraisers with them. And the rise in anti-Asian racism we're seeing over the past number of months should be of concern to everyone. And I would recommend that the members of the Conservative Party, in their zeal to make personal attacks, not start to push too far into intolerance towards Canadians of diverse origins. We will continue to stand up to defend Canadians' interests, Canadian security. We will continue to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep Canadians safe while participating in the global research community and stand up for tolerance and diversity.
You know, there's so many incredible things. I was just jotting down some of the language. Trudeau, and I'm sorry I have subjected you to so much Trudeau, Spencer. I'm sorry.
I'll survive, I think. Yeah.
Trudeau said Canadians of diverse origins. But that's the thing, they weren't Canadians. They were Chinese nationals. They weren't Canadians. It wasn't an ethnic comment. And he said the global research community. It's not the global research community. It's the Chinese military learning how to weaponize viruses. The chutzpah there, Spencer, but he's getting away with it as usual, isn't he?
Yeah, I think the one angle that hasn't been touched on too much is that, you were talking about anti-Asian racism. Well, Trudeau came closer to that than anybody in the House of Commons, right? Because the Conservatives said, okay, we have Communist China's military shouldn't have access to a facility, right? What was the first thing Trudeau said afterwards? Oh, don't be racist against Asian Canadians.
Right.
So he's linking China's communist military to Canadian citizens who happen to be Asian, a link that most people wouldn't be making. So it's almost like he wants to kind of stoke resentment so then he can say, oh, look, I'm fighting against resentment and I'm standing up for diversity. So again, this is the problem when you have someone who in some ways is fundamentally unserious leading a country, right? It's not like a student council where we'll just be nice to everybody, bring a bunch of different people on board, we'll have a bunch of nice meetings. I mean, you're dealing with countries like China that are led by some ruthless people. They have ruthless ideas and they're willing to do pretty much anything to get their way. So this whole idea that, oh, I'll just repeat, a few, woke buzzwords and everything will be fine. I mean, that's not how it works.
I think you made a very important point there. Candice Bergen, I know her a little bit, is one of the most fair-minded, gentle people. I mean, I think she's tough also, but she would never express anything in a racist vein. And she didn't. I mean, China is a country. There is a Chinese ethnicity or many ethnicities. It was Trudeau who made the connection. And it reminds me when people compare things to Hitler. And I always say, don't do that, because if you're saying this guy is as bad as Hitler, then Hitler was no worse than this guy, and you're actually normalizing Hitler. I mean, when people use language, and so when Candice Bergen says, what about China's dictatorship spying on us? If you're the one who says, stop picking on Chinese Canadians, you're the one who's made the link. You're the one who has started people thinking, oh, should I be worried about this ethnically Chinese person here? I think you're so right. It was Trudeau that made the dual loyalties implication. It was Trudeau who made the ethnic stereotype implication. It wasn't Candice Bergen. It was Trudeau.
Yeah, and one of the big problems is, a lot of Asian Canadians, especially, Chinese Canadians, they're in a very tough situation because there is obviously a terrible rise in anti-Asian racism, which I think everyone should condemn and should oppose. But they're also getting, intimidation from China itself, right? I mean, people who have family back in China, they say, oh, well, we don't really like that you have some, say it's pro, Uyghur activism or pro Hong Kong activism. Yeah, we don't really like that. It would be a shame if something happened to your family members. And they're getting almost no help from the Trudeau government. So you have on one side people, racist people who are treating them badly, and then China treating them badly, and then Trudeau basically just saying, yeah, we're not going to do anything to help you, but we'll just accuse everybody of racism even when they bring up legitimate questions. A lot of people, here who are of Chinese descent, I mean, they left to get away from the Chinese Communist Party. So they're still in many ways being subjected to it, and they're getting no assistance from Trudeau. So yeah, it's pretty arrogant, for him to claim he's all of a sudden the defender of Asian Canadians when he's left a lot of Chinese Canadians completely out to dry.
Yeah. The other people who are really pushing this line that asking about the Wuhan Institute of Virology is essentially racist It's the Chinese government. I mean, it's sort of creepy. Twitter is banned in China, but Twitter allows Chinese propagandists. By that I mean, the dictatorship, their state-run media, their ambassadors around the world. There are hundreds, maybe thousands, of Chinese propagandists on Twitter, often with verified accounts that are given great credibility. They're the other ones pushing this line that to ask about the pandemic's origin is racist. I find it's always a bad sign when the Prime Minister of Canada is saying word for word what the Chinese dictatorship's diplomats are saying. Like, if you are reading the same talking points as Beijing's spin doctors, maybe you should check your bearings again. Now, I don't know. I find it creepy. I don't know. Are you and I a minority, or are most people nodding along and saying, yes, we shouldn't ask about this Wuhan connection? It's racist to do so. Or are most people seeing through this? Are you worried he's getting away with it?
I think one of the things we're seeing a lot in the world is, people who are the public mind and the private mind, right? So I think, there's a lot of fear out there. People are obviously afraid of being accused of racism or not being woke enough, or, whatever's going on. And so people will publicly go along with something, and then privately you can be pretty sure they're saying, this is crazy. I don't believe any of this. But, people are being scared into it. So that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to, I think, get the average person who certainly doesn't trust China and certainly is pretty angry about what happened. He's trying to get them to feel like, oh, no, I don't want to be accused of racism if I say anything. So it's a fear tactic, and it'll work on some people. We'll see how strong-minded and strong-willed the country is if it can push back against that. So we'll see. But, what's also concerning is in terms of, Canada's national interests. I mean, we've seen this mistake already over a year ago. It's the same thing, when people were saying, well, this whole thing in Wuhan looks pretty concerning, people getting sick. And maybe we should stop flights from China. And China said, no, that's bigoted and racist. You're discriminating against, Chinese people. And Patty Hajdu and Justin Trudeau and Theresa Tam, they said very similar things. That, border controls will cause harm. This is about bigotry. This is unacceptable. So they've already made the same mistake of trusting China before and using, the rhetoric of any criticism as racist. So the fact that they're doing it again, it's quite disturbing.
Yeah, it's incredible. I guess none of us should be surprised, because Trudeau's go-to when he's feeling on the defensive is to accuse his opponents of, frankly, many of the same things he does. He accuses other people of racism. He's the guy who dresses up in blackface. He accuses other people of sexism. He's the one who groped Rose Knight in Creston, BC. I think calling people racist is his go-to place when he's feeling like he doesn't have a substantive answer. I'm just worried he's going to get away with it. Hey, for those who haven't read the story yet, Spencer has it on his website prominently. The story is Trudeau's racism deflection on China is a strategy based on weakness and desperation. And if you're not already signed up for Spencer's website and you get the email updates and supporting him, I encourage you to do so. He's one of the few independent voices left in Canada, and we're always grateful to have you on the show. Thanks for coming by today, Spencer.
Good to talk.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.